what I shared with the last group, what I love is I wanted to first say thank you because I know this is a valuable time out of your schedule just to be here for a couple days. There is no slow time or off time in agriculture anymore. It's just go, go, go. So, when you think about going to a dealer meeting or something, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get PowerPointed to death. This isn't really worth it. I don't want to go. We hope we give you some nuggets to go away from this to improve your business and that you also have a little bit of fun and connect. So we appreciate the time. We take it serious. So with that, I'm going to jump into kind of our objectives and what we're after. You guys just got done with the business builder, right? Is that where you're at? Okay, good deal. So you're going to be, after lunch, you're going to be going outside and you're going to be seeing some of this stuff actually in the field. And we'll get into some agronomy, but it's really, this biologist fertility thing is really about coming out of here. I just want you guys to have the confidence to incorporate these products, this concept into your recommendations when you go to sell fertilizer. And one thing I would say is what's coming up here as we get ready to harvest is we're going to get into a lot of fertilizer conversations, right? There's guys booking P and K, there's guys booking nitrogen. I booked my nitrogen already for my farm operation. I farm a little bit as well. There's a lot of buzz about P and K. It's a lot lower than last year, but it's starting to bump up a little bit. There's some strength. So you're going to be in conversations with your producers, whether about utilizing P and K and nitrogen for this fall or utilizing it in the spring, whatever your market is. But with that, I think in conjunction with that conversation is also having this conversation. The time to sell these products is when you're having the fertilizer conversation. And the example I used in the last room is, I assume we have quite a few people here that sell herbicides. And if you were like me when you sold herbicides, when I did that in retail, that was the same time that I sold herbicides is when I also talked about fungicides. Because if I didn't have that discussion then, it was a maybe sale later and additional spend and additional money, and I'm not sure I want to do it. But at the time that we had the conversation in the off season, we created we made the room for the spend. And these products, they are additional spends in some cases, but really what we're wanting to come out of here with is understanding that it can actually be a reallocation of some money from our fertility spend because we're going to create a lot more efficiency. So just keeping that in mind, and hopefully that's what we take you away from here with. Again, that's the objectives. Really, the number one objective is at the top. It's about you guys in this room, which is we're here to provide information that will empower you to get your customers to rethink their fertilizer spend and incorporate the biology as fertility framework. That's what this session's about. In that, we'll discuss inefficiencies of, I'm going to change that to commercial fertilizers. I had somebody come to me afterwards and says, synthetic is a nasty word. Everything's natural. It comes out of the earth. And I agree. The industry started saying synthetic all the time, and synthetic to the person in Chicago sounds really bad. So I can't change it on these slides, but it's commercial fertilizers would really be the way to say it to be a good steward of our industry. Understand how biologicals can unlock the nutrients in your soil. Explore the opportunities to build a fertility plan with biologicals and nutrient use efficiency as a primary consideration. And just learn how our delivery mechanisms, like you guys saw the biocapsules earlier. We've got a product in our excavator that is patented delivery mechanism. How those are designed to help make you more bushels for less. And when we say more bushels for less, there's probably a lot of people think, well, that just means we got cheap products. It just means you're cheaper. Now, in some cases, you saw in the example this morning when Mitch talked about areas where we have cut a lot of cost. It's not because we're cheaper. It's because we've provided a way to bring products to market more efficiently. There are times that we might have a product that's $1 or $2 or more than another product. But it's about real productivity gain and how we gain more bushels through the excess. So some of our more bushels for less is if we can take the same amount we're spending on the acre and rethink how to spend that money, and we can produce the same or more bushels, then we've accomplished our goal. So with that, you're not going to only hear from me. You're going to hear from me about half the time. What I really look forward to is for you to hear from the gentleman behind me. I'll let them introduce themselves, but real quick, Brian Haschemeyer with BRANDT, Patrick Conyers with CNC Solutions, Ag Solutions, a customer dealer that's had a lot of experience utilizing these types of technologies, and Mike Wingrove with Integrated Ag, and you'll see Garrett Land and Cattle up there. It's because I wanted a farmer's perspective as well. Mike is a dealer, but also works very closely within Garrett Land and Cattle's farm operation. We mentioned Kelly Garrett earlier. his son had passed away a little over a week ago. We're very saddened by that. It's tragic. There's just no other words I can express. Since I have kids of my own, I just can't. That's all I can say. But Kelly's in the picture. He's the cool guy in the sunglasses. Very dynamic. Love working with him, and he's got a lot of passion around this biology is fertility. But Mike's doing a great job working closely with them, and we'll be able to talk from that perspective. So again, our positioning is biology is fertility. And really what we're after is increasing nutrient use efficiency, which we'll get into, taking that commercial fertilizer and increasing the availability and efficiency of it. Build strong, healthy plants fast. That's our REVLINE Hopper Throttle corn and soybean franchise, and how we can utilize that to really get off to a good start, build massive root systems, and again, drive additional nutrition, early available nutrition to that crop more effectively than we can maybe with other methods that we're currently using today. And optimize in-season genetic potential. We won't get into this a lot. You'll hear about this in the plots. That's that percentage that we do in season, utilizing biostimulants, foliar nutrition. So with that, then we'll get into where I think we're in this space is that when we do the right things early, we do reduce stress and increase genetic potential in season, because if we got a bigger root system, we're going to take up more nutrients and more water. So that's the agronomic positioning. One thing I did skip, and I apologize. I want to real quick take 30 seconds. I told you who was out here, but real quick, let me go back and let these guys introduce themselves individually. Brian, if you could, please.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Brian Haschemeyer. I'm with BRANDT. Been there 17 years, and pretty much most of my work has been in product development and research. And so I'll be providing a little bit of information about the technology behind some of the products, because a lot of that my group's worked on. So
I'm Patrick Kanye, and I told last group I'm just a dude from Kentucky, man. So I sit with the smart folks, so when we get into the weeds, we'll talk to Brian about that. But I started come from a family farm. We still farm today, corn, soybeans, wheat, tobacco in western Kentucky. And started a little ag retail company about 5 years ago, and then just launched a brand. We sell a lot of the Meristem products. It's called Muni Crop Performance. And so, yeah, it's been great.
Mike Wingroup from Western Iowa with Integrated Ag Solutions, part owner in that. We were in our third year of business, been working with Meristem the last 2 on different products, work with extreme ag growers, and just here to tell you our experiences with what the products we use.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we cover all bases with these guys, and I think you're really gonna enjoy the information they have to share. So with that, I'll just get started here on. One thing we'll talk about this at the end again too, real quick, and we'll touch on it as we get through this. But something to consider when you're out talking to your customers. To me, the number one question that comes to mind and how we bring this up is, when you're in front of that customer, what is the opportunity to build your fertility plan with biologicals? Right? That grower is curious about biologicals. I've done a lot of grower meetings. I know everybody. Definitely, I know Brian and Patrick and Mike, they've all done grower meetings. We've all done grower meetings, and every time I get on this topic, there's questions. They are curious, and they know it's coming, and they know that there's a lot of value in it. They're just trying to figure out what does what, when do I use what, how do I know that it's effective, and I think what we've done to this point and learned is that we've cracked the code, if you will, to at least understanding what does what. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot more than we know today. But we also figured out how to deliver it most effectively so the farmer can actually use it. So now that we're there, now let's actually incorporate it and make it part of our fertility program. So that's just a question that I put up there really as a way of to model the way, if you will, for you guys when you're in front of your customers to say, hey, when we're talking about fertilizer, Mr. Farmer, what's the opportunity to build that plan utilizing biologicals? And I promise you the feedback coming back from that, we'll have a lot of questions. So with that, we kind of put together some guiding principles. Put crop residue to work. That's number one way. Let's make sure we're putting that crop residue to work. There's a lot of valuable nutrition in that stover. 2, manage nitrogen. So your commercial nitrogen that you're applying, let's make sure we're managing that with management tools that are biologically friendly. Right? Not picking on any products in the market. You won't hear me name any. But there's a lot of products in the market that are not biologically friendly. To me, they're going against the thing that we're trying to promote. So let's work with the system, right? So when we're going to utilize commercial nitrogen, let's manage it effectively with things that are friendly on biologicals. 3, build a massive root system. We can do all the nutrient release things that we want to do. If we don't have a big enough net to catch all those fish, it doesn't do us any good. So let's put out a big root system that can take up the nutrition and the water that's releasing in that soil. So another thing we're going to touch on with that is kind of just bring to light, again, synthetic, but we'll change that to commercial. I did, right as soon as it was over. So I thought, synthetic fertilizer is kind of a bad word. So I did appreciate that feedback. So commercial fertilizers are inefficient. We've got some ranges up here. You'll hear different things, but anywhere between 5 and 25%, I'd say it catches it. We've got 15 to 25 here to try to narrow that. That's really in phosphate primarily, but we see some inefficiencies in potassium and other nutrients, right, where we're not getting the uptake even though we're applying the nutrition. So with that, we're going to address that on how we can utilize some of the Meristem portfolio with these technologies that you heard about when you first got started. We have the excavator product. We have Ether. We're wildly excited about launching this year in our real commercial launch. We used it last year and have had really good results, and we're launching it commercially this year. And Brian will give us a lot of insight on that technology as that does come from BRANDT. So as we think about our fertilizer applications, the next thing that we have going on is harvest. I mean, we've all pretty much done all that we can do to the crop. The last group had some guys from southern Texas, so they were done with harvest. But in most cases, harvest is around the corner in the next couple weeks to 6 or 8 weeks, depending on the market you're in. So that is the next thing we're thinking about. With that, let's have a discussion about the value of stover post-harvest. Whether it's corn stover, soybean stover, wheat, whatever the crop is, there's valuable nutrition tied up in there. This is a slide from Dr. Fred Below. For those that maybe attended last year, Dr. Fred Below gave a very entertaining hour-long message that I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was phenomenal. But this is one of his slides, and he's pretty passionate about the value of the nutrition that's in stover and the role that biologicals play and make sure that we capture that nutrition. So I'm going to leave this up here for a while for us to look at. But as you can see, I mean, the 200 bushel corn crop's got a significant amount of nutrition. And are we saying that you're going to replace all that and hey, let's cut our nutrition back by that much? No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying there is a percentage of that, and you saw in the Wysocki Farms data earlier today that talks about that, and that we're starting to see as we trial, we're starting to see a pattern of nutrient release, nutrient availability, and I think for me the biggest thing is that it's available in season. And to me, it's not about the fact that we'll never get these nutrients out of the stover. Yeah, I understand that Mother Nature's going to do its thing, and we're going to see release, of that nutrition sooner or later. I'm more about controlling the time frame. If I can cycle those nutrients and have them available in season when I want them to use them, when the plant's surging for them, that's going to bring the biggest value to me. So then that means if I've got to reduce some of my fertility spend to allow for this, that makes total sense to me, because when we're applying excavator, we are applying fertilizer. This is where this biologist fertility thing comes into play. So with that, I guess what I want to do is turn it over a little bit and understand better the nutrition that comes out of that stover, why it's plant available, and kind of some of the results we're seeing from it. I think, Patrick, last time we kicked it off, and you gave us a little bit of a backdrop on how this is looking for your guys' operation and what you're seeing with your customers.
Yeah, so 3 things with us. When I look at this product, it's hard to, how do you know if it's working? How do you know if it's effective? How do you know if it's paying? And there's a couple different ways that, it's been promoted or advertised as a stalk breakdown product. So some of you might say, if I go out there in the field and I take 80 acres, I spray 40, I split it, one side is not black and completely broken down, it didn't work, right? That's how some of us might think. So for us, we see it a couple different ways. One is that's breaking down the stalks, and we've seen that. Now remember, guys, that's based off of temperature. The warmer it is, the better this stuff's going to work. So you guys that are up in Minot, North Dakota, you better be chasing the combine. You better be trying to figure something out. Put some stuff in there to help it along, some 32%, some ATS, some other things that are going to work to help it along. I'm in Kentucky, so we have a little more heat, so we break down a little bit naturally. I've seen this stuff work well in the springtime. I've seen it work well behind wheat for double crop beans. We like it all the time. The mineralization of nutrients. We can put a value on the cost of phosphorus and potassium for 2024 season. So that's another way the product can pay for itself. How do you value it that way? And the last one for me, I didn't bring this up in the last group, but this is important for us. How many of y'all are no-till in here? You no-till guys? There's quite a few, 50% probably in every group. And even if you're not no-till, when most of y'all are going out and planting, you ain't got any trash in the trench ever, do you? Never. None of us got trash in the trench. So especially with the no-till guys, when that no-till culture comes through, every time during the year, if you're corn on corn, and some of you aren't, but even if it's soybean stubble, that no-till culture is always splitting whatever trash or fodder is right in front of you, right? Or your road cleaners is always getting everything out of the way. Man, I've walked behind a bunch of planters this year, and we're getting trash in the trench. So when I use this product, I see differences on emergence, okay? Because I'm not getting as much trash in the trench. So that's another way the product can pay for itself. How do you monitor that? Y'all know the value of emergence. If all our corn comes up at the same time, that's a big deal. So those are kind of some of the things that we see just kind of practically in the field on our side.
Yeah, you bring up a real good point there, Patrick. I was at Precision Farming in Bloomington, Illinois, a couple weeks ago, where they do a lot of their research farm, and they had a board there that talked about corn and inoculated with residue, and it's a significant yield decrease. And they call it inoculated with residue, and what they defined as that was that it meant that trash got in the trench. And he said that the way that they measure that, they actually plant it and they place the trash in that trench. And they do it at different percentages. It's 10%, 30%, that kind of thing. And the yield losses from it are significant. And so they actually talked about it, that even at the yield that we're at in a lot of markets where we have even minimal tillage, that we're seeing that trash enter that seed trench. So that's a great point to surface, something to really think about. So, Brian, what I wouldn't mind, I didn't do this in the last one because time gets away and start doing things. I talk about a lot of times the value of the nutrition coming out of here as being plant available. If you could touch on, if I'm going to use this as a fertilizer, right? If I'm going to rely on this as part of my fertilizer spend, and I'm going to go out and do what Meristem said. I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell my customers to run excavator in the fall or in the spring, whatever works best for your operation, because the beautiful thing about it is it works quickly for nutrient cycling. Focusing on the nutrient cycling portion, taking away the seed-to-soil contact that Patrick surfaced there. What is the value in the nutrition coming out of here, and how do we view that as fertilizer?
Yeah, so from a trial aspect, when we started setting up trials to evaluate excavator, there's a lot of trial in there, but one of the best ways we found to actually evaluate this was the soil test nutrient levels at different stages after the application, spring, summer, and fall. So, and speaking of this year, we have a lot of it out of our research farm. Our research farm is broken up into different tillage systems, from all the way back to no-till on the north side of it. So those samples were coming back pretty much right about, the V5 timing on corn, early R timing, where we had about 50 pounds more soluble K per acre and about 20 pounds more P2O5. And we've got a lot of replicated plots out like that. They're not all that same number. It depends on how much residue is out there, but we're picking up somewhere between 20 to 30 pounds of P and somewhere between 30 to 60 pounds of K2O. The K thing for me is the one that is really beneficial for us, because a lot of us have K, but we don't have enough soluble K. And the K coming out of the residue from the excavator breaking down is very soluble, it's very available. And if we look at peak K demand during rapid growth and the flowering, we're losing a lot of yield impact our way from that. We tend to have drier summers. Dry soils don't release K near as well. So if we can have K early, particularly early vegetative through where the corn's really growing really fast and the soybeans are starting to flower. That's really peak K demand. One thing about K nutrition that is interesting, if you think about nutrients, K is mobile in the plant. So the plant has the ability to retranslocate and move K. They can't do that with all nutrients. So if we can have high K status before we hit those drought periods and have high K availability, it helps us get through some of those dry stress periods. So we're seeing big value from the K release for sure. Obviously, there's the nitrogen and phosphate everybody talks about, but I don't think we focus enough on the K release. And we're really seeing that in the excavator. The other thing we're having a hard time seeing is sometimes the fields look very visual. Like you can walk out and see a visual difference in the field, and sometimes you can't. And so you can walk out and you can break stalks and things like that. You can see the difference. And the fields tend to ebb and flow. So we'll go out 1 week and you can definitely see the advantage of the excavator. And then we got 2 weeks later and they look similar. But we're always picking that up, and I know we're doing really well as we're picking it up in the soil test. Now, if you're going to do soil tests, you got to do live soil tests because soil has a lot of variability in it. So these are live soil tests over a whole area, and you got to aggregate all the samples together. You can't just take one soil test here and one soil test there. So, but we're seeing a big boost from the K for sure. Obviously, nitrogen is really important in the P, but so we're pretty excited about that moving forward.
Yeah, no, Brian mentioned the K, and I said in the last group when I was talking about this that I didn't get on this slide soon enough. So surfacing that K and that experience at the research farm, I really appreciate. We have a lot of, we can put on K in some areas endlessly and never seem to get any in-season availability of potassium. This year, well, it was dry, and we didn't get much potassium uptake at all. But even in a lot of years where we see, I'd call it normal. I don't know if there's a normal, and does anybody believe there's a normal? I don't think normal exists. But in the normal environment, we just see that lack of K. And when I was first around this product 3 years ago, that was the very first thing that hit my mind when it came to nutrient cycling. Again, outside of the multiple other benefits there is, when we think about this as a fertilizer spend, it was the available K that I could capture in season that was plant available. It wasn't going to be tied up through some other process or inhibited to come into the plant through some other process. And that K is very, very important in season. As Brian mentioned, for lots of reasons. I know we've got a Meristem representative here in Taylor, and she could probably tell us all day long about K. She has a background with nature, so we won't go into that now. But I think you'd agree there's a lot of value in in-season potassium. So with that, we can capture some of that with the residue. Mike, you got from a farm experience. You guys have been playing with. You're in a high yield environment. Western Iowa, a lot of no-till, residue is an issue. Tell us about your experiences with, maybe you guys have tested a lot of products for a lot of years and probably have a little bit of frustration with some of those products because of efficacy and give us a little background on where you're at with that.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, we've been trying to find a product similar to this. And we've tried 5-6 different products, and Peter came to us and he's like, hey, we got this excavator product, and it's all about the delivery mechanism. And we thought, here we go, another sales pitch, And he gave us some to try. We're in no-till, corn on corn, and we put it on the first part of April. I think it was April 11th. And he's like, well, it's warm. You're going to see some good results here very shortly, 2-3 weeks. We're out checking emergence, and we noticed, so we had some residue breakdown and took pictures, videos, and this was 11 days. Obviously, every year is different. We got some slower breakdown stories as well. And I called him, I said, Peter, you weren't lying. I said, we're seeing good stuff here, and then he explained more. As he said, the delivery mechanism is huge. They keep that bacteria alive, gets into the residue. Some of the customers we work with use like a stock devastator or a crimper, so that helps get the bacteria into the residue. So we went forward. So then we started to take samples, similar to what we saw earlier today in the other room. First couple samples, we didn't see a lot. So they obviously biology is fertility, right? We're like, oh, yeah, the sales pitch came back. Peter's feeding us full. So we took it through, kept sampling, and then we started seeing it. Like you said, it's not something you just go out. There's no golden bullet. Golden bullet. If there was, we'd all be doing it. So we went out, kept sampling throughout the season, and I don't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but it did keep increasing, and that's what we're after. Using excavator, we want to break down the residue, makes planting easier next year. Get it on earlier in the fall is better. Get that heat, get that moisture. We've turned guys to more fall application, and like I said, we want to get it on earlier in the fall. We had a couple guys get it, late October, early November, it's getting cooler. They called. Same story. I don't need to repeat that. Same story. What I was doing to Peter, like, yeah, this is a joke. They were doing that on me now. So I was like, yeah, I'll come look and explain to them entryways into the residue, and then winter went, spring came, residue was broke down more, planters went through it great. But I think a lot of times we get caught up on, it's a residue product. We need to focus more on the nutrients we're getting out of the residue rather than just getting rid of the residue.
Absolutely. Thank you. You touched on a couple things, and one I'd have maybe Brian help us out here with. I'll bounce back over here and give him room to come up here. But you mentioned the part of the efficacy you thought or the performance was coming from the carrier system. The fact that we're getting it out there at different times. And yes, we hear about, hey, I can't really use this when it's getting cold. Some of you guys are probably in a pretty cold environments in the north. And it creates an issue for using a product like this, because you're saying, hey, there's no way I can get it out. There's no way. It's too cold. There's no way it's going to work. And if that happens, if it doesn't work operationally, then you can still put it on in the spring, and we'll see a lot of value from the cycle. The first year they tried it, that's when it was in the spring. And so what I'd like Brian to touch on, Brian along with some people within BRANDT that he'll mention, were very instrumental in helping us build this carrier system. The biologicals themselves, they exist in other competitive products. We just put them on the label. That's the difference there. I mean, what makes us unique in that space is we list them. Okay, it's not a proprietary blend. They just list the biologicals, and they do perform a function. But the problem is in a lot of other products, they don't get to the residue either at the same CFU count that they were when they were in the jug, or it's too cold and things happen, or it's too hot, or it's too dry, or whatever the case may be, and we don't get a chance to see it actually reignite and work. The carrier system that is specific to Meristem that we have labeled as microbialized, I want Brian to talk a little bit about that and how that increases and keeps that efficacy in there and gets rid of some of those inconsistencies.
Yeah, take a step back a little bit here. So our team, I've got a team of formulation chemists. So there's myself and a guy named Lucas Lovis who does most of the stuff. There's a whole team there. And a lot of what BRANDT specializes in is actually delivery technologies. And so we build a lot of delivery technologies for companies. And Meristem came to us and brought the microbes to us. So our involvement was trying to make sure that the microbes are viable, they stay alive, they have good shelf life. It's a high concentration. They wanted a high concentration, so low volume would go over a lot of acres. And so that's where the whole thing developed. There's a few things that we identified pretty early in the trial work, is that uniform coverage of the spores at application is critical. So if you go out and make an application, and the spores don't stay uniform through the spray solution, you're going to have uneven distribution of the spores. So that's a bad thing. So we did a lot of work on making sure that those spores were dispersed very well. We also had to worry about shelf life. So anytime you put spores into a liquid solution, they can start to imbibe moisture and they can become viable, and then they'll run their growth process and die. So fortunately, Lucas, who's with us, spent 15 years at ADM and actually worked in the bioethanol process with spores to break down ethanol. So he had a bit of a head start on that. That's a patent pending delivery system. The spores are very uniformly distributed. And probably the second thing we identified that was super important that really makes this product a little bit different than the competitor products is the ability for the spores to actually penetrate and get through the residue. So if you look at the corn stalks, the outer side, we have to get the spores into the pith for them to actually do their job. So that particular microbialized system is very, very effective, and the delivery technology is actually outstanding. And once those spores get in there, they can harbor and overwinter if there's not enough moisture. They're very, very stable spores, the way they're formulated. Once moisture gets to those spores, they'll activate. So we get a lot of questions about, well, what if there's not enough moisture? What if it's too cold? The activity of those spores will ebb and flow. So as the moisture and temperature creeps up, their activity will spike up and their population will spike up. As that goes down, they'll spike down, they'll leave more spores. So the big criteria is even distribution across the entire field and actually getting the spores inside the pith. And once they're inside the pith, they're actually slightly protected. It's a bit insulated. And that really increased the activity when we started doing the trials. And I think that's why the product's performing so much better than some of the competitor products. And then Meristem actually made, I think, a really wise decision to patent and protect that technology. So,
Yes, thank you. So one thing I'd ask you, Brian, or opinion, anybody, I didn't think of this last session, but thinking through this, these winter applications and even when we get them done and, it's later, it's cold, and you think, oh, is this worth it? One, I want to answer that question just in case any of you were thinking that's not a concern. And that also you can utilize it in season in the spring and get that rapid breakdown that Mike shared that they experience on their farm and their customers' acres. But I was reading an article from No Till Strip Till that made me think here, I don't know, it was a few months back, that talked about alfalfa and how that best cutting is always that first cutting. And they actually talked about that the thaw, the freeze and thaw, that there's still biological activity going on there that's releasing nutrition. So that and that when that crop comes out of dormancy, that it's seeing a significant uptake in nutrition. I guess weighing in on a little bit, when I think about excavator and applying it in the fall, when you do, would it be fair to say that we would capture that type of activity? We've got days that's 40 degrees and we got days that's 15 degrees. And as those things happen, we're taking advantage of those days, and that's why I think we see that degradation. Mike can speak of as well from fall to spring. And so just some thoughts there.
yeah, you'll definitely capture activity. And you'll actually get a bit of an insulation factor from the stalk itself. Once you get good moisture in there, the microbes start to eat, actually generate a little bit of heat, and you'll get some activity. There is going to be a temperature at which it drops, start to get below 40 degrees once the inside. And when I say 40 degrees, I'm talking about the inside temperature of the pith, which is quite a bit different than the outside air temperature. So even though the air cools a little bit, the activity and the temperature of the pith is going to be up for a little while, and then it'll ebb down. Then it'll get cool, obviously, to a point that it won't work, or potentially it'll get too dry if you have dry spells. So the nice thing about excavator is you can apply it in the fall, and that's what we do for a lot of climates. But it is pretty versatile. Some areas it may make sense in the spring, a different cutting. So it is fairly versatile when you put it out, but we like to put it out as soon as possible.
Yep. Thank you. So one last thing I want to touch on when it comes to this excavator piece is I like to always touch on the business side of it too, right? So guys have done a great job of hopefully better understanding the value of the product and what we can do and how and why it is a fertilizer spend, because we can take some of what we're looking up here and increase availability of that, not only in valuable nutrition, but in plant available nutrition and at a time that the plant needs it, right? We can hit all three of those buttons. And so if that means reducing some of the spend from that commercial fertilizer, then let's absolutely consider that as part of the conversation. Go ahead, sir.
Are you guys, I've heard of adding new buds to attack the lignin on the outside of the stalk as well, or is there any value in that? Or?
Can I speak of that, Brian? I know that we had a version where we were calling it, I think, the F bug, and that was added as far as the reason. I think it was doing a better job penetrating that lignin, but you may be able to capture more of that.
Well, when you look at that, I mean, there's hemocellulose, cellulose, that's the inside pith, and there's lignin strands, and the outside has a lot of lignin and lipids in it. So currently, and I'm not the microbial guy, more the delivery guy, currently we're seeing it either at the pith better, but if we could break the lignin down, that would actually be a big benefit. A good portion of the nutrient part of the stover that has it is not in the lignin though. But from a tillage perspective and breaking down and those type of things, from the practical thing of the residues in the way when you're planting, to be able to break the lignin down would be really nice.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I really appreciate it. And then, any other questions? Go ahead, sir.
So does tillage help or hinder this then?
Perfect segue to where I was wanting to go next. So yeah, so tillage, anytime we can break up that stalk and create more places for that biological to inoculate, I guess for lack of a better word, is better. So chopping heads, guys use chopping heads. If you go out and you want to apply this product in the fall and turn right around and run a turbo tillage tool, you can. Not required, as long as you got good coverage going across that, because one of our value propositions is removing a tillage pass if it's necessary to pay for it. We used to do a vertical tillage pass in the spring and a vertical tillage pass in the fall. We've actually removed our fall pass and only run it in the spring, just to help warm up the soil, and it shatters like glass. So, but if you can create more opportunities for that excavator to capture those open wounds, the better off you are. Now, I will tell you from personal experience, I had a customer send me a video last fall that high yield environment, 240, 250 bushel corn, black dirt. I mean, Central Plains, Illinois. I mean, it's one of those spoiled areas where they just throw the corn out there, make good yield. But nonetheless, so they're really critical of this kind of stuff because they don't think they need it. Well, they applied it right after harvest, split the field, chiseled it, ripped it a day later. 30 days after that, they went out their fall ammonia application. There's a difference in actually how it applied. I don't have the video to show you, or as I would. It's on my phone, but difference in how it applied. And they walked across the field. It was kicking through it, and you can see it right at the line where it got blacker versus where it didn't. So no matter your tillage practices or we used to kind of pigeonhole this as a no-till product. And this is really a product that's, to me, part of your fertility program because we're cycling that nutrition. And we're wanting to add that nutrition into your soil profile to make available for the next crop. So it's really, it's like going out there with that fertilizer spreader, right, and spreading that fertilizer. If you go out there and spray this and you want to work it in just like you work in your fertilizer, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. And it's going to increase you're actually probably going to increase the efficacy because you're going to start to get some soil thrown up on it and moisture and, really, really accentuate that activity.
Is there data on the ratio of the nutrients that are based on the leaf tissue versus the stalk?
You can go anywhere. Help me out on that one.
So are you talking about the pounds of residue versus the leaf tissue? I would think there probably is. It would make sense that there is. I haven't seen any publication. I think a lot of these numbers are generalities. What they're basically doing is taking the average nutrient value typically and coming up with these numbers. But if your tissue test values are really low, obviously you're going to have less of the nutrient in the residue.
But if the nutrient is in that pith, right, and what we're trying to do is get X%.
Oh, you're talking like a correlation between a leaf value to a pith.
Because you can then tie the value of the excavator to what you actually get out of it, right? Whether you're in no-till or tillage.
Yeah.
Right, and monetize it to a customer.
So you could do that way. I think we've been doing that via the soil test value, which is a different way to get to what you're getting to. You're trying to get to the potential release versus what we're getting to.
And or speed and time of breakdown, right? To hit where the crop actually needs the nutrition.
That's an interesting way to think about that. It's not something we've looked at from that perspective, but now you got me thinking. Now you're going to make my research harder. But yeah, there may be something to that in terms of this is how much value is actually in the stover. We know ahead of time, and they can be released. A lot of these are basically calibrations of a lot of data put together. But you could maybe think about that on your specific field if you have the data.
So, yes, sir.
So when you're seeing soil test levels go up, are you seeing tissue test levels go up?
We've seen it in the K, because that's really what we've been focused more on our farm. Peter may have some from their other data, but we're seeing it in the K. We're seeing it particularly in the dry periods. I don't know how many have had a dry stretch this year. You get dry soils, K uptake wasn't up. What we saw was earlier K uptake in the leaves. And then that kind of normalized. Where we had the excavator, we saw a couple points higher. And what we really saw was more visual. We saw less potassium deficiencies on the lower leaves later, and we saw a better ability, the plant's better ability to deal with water and stress management, which we know K is really important in drought and heat stress situations.
And I know, oh, just real quick on that, I know, and Patrick will come up and when we get into some of the other topics, but I think from a tissue test and experience with biologicals and how that's played a significant role impacting your business in a positive way, we'll have you highlight that here in a little bit. But Patrick's got a lot of framework around that question. I think he can help with as well.
It seems like I've read somewhere that a lot of the potassium washes out pretty quick with corn stalks with rains. Is that right?
You talking
All
about?
is that the leaves?
The leaves. That potassium washes out fast from residue.
It'll wash out faster than the other nutrients in the residue because it's not actually bound, but it still takes the residue breaking down to do that. It's a relative thing. Relative to P or nitrogen, it'll wash out faster, but it definitely aids from the breaking down of the residue for sure.
So the positive thing, I think what I'm taking from that is that it's got to break down first for it to be subject to leaching, as we'll call it. But the good thing about it being subject to leaching is that means it's plant available. It's in a plant available form.
As the residue starts to break down, the water actually penetrates the pith a lot better, and that's the key to getting it out. They'll soak, but to get the water actually move through it, it'll move a lot faster. But K does leach out of the residue faster than the other nutrients.
What gallons per acre are people running when they're applying it? And have you had any trouble, or are people testing the water with chlorine and the water going back to the biologicals, or should that be something to check?
So I'll address the chlorine question real fast because these are bacillus spores, which we didn't choose. That was Meristem's, but I'm glad they chose bacillus spores. Bacillus spores are very tolerant of low levels of chlorine. When I talk about that, just like the type of stuff you'll find in city water, so it's not really an issue with that. Gram-negative bacteria definitely can be affected by that, but most of the bacteria in the excavator is spore form, so it tolerates it quite well. If you are worried about it, there are things that can remove chlorine, and actually ATS all by itself, just as a hint, is a very good chlorine remover.
Okay. Great question. Gallons per acre. We recommend 10. That's our blanket recommendation. I've got guys that have put it through drones at 2 gallons the acre. Still have really good efficacy. It's really about coverage. So it's a coverage thing. We say 10 gallons because we want good coverage. If you can get really good coverage with 2, then that's fine. But it's really that's really the message. But we have a lot of 10 that goes out in the fall. Is there any others? Did I miss a hand?
When putting sulfur or nitrogen with this in the fall to give the nitrogen to balance the carbon nitrogen ratio, be an advantage just to make it go as nitrogen.
I think, for sure, there's heads shaking up here. I'll make a quick comment. I think, the way we position this product is it's easy to use. It's all in one. It's all encompassing. So it's not required. It'll work very well without the nitrogen or sulfur. It can mix well with your herbicides. As Brian mentioned, you're not going to hurt the biologicals. So it's very, but in the case where you want to try to say, okay, I want to try to expedite the performance of it, adding a little nitrogen or sulfur is not a bad thing to the point that you're talking about.
How many pounds would you recommend?
Do you have a recommendation there at all?
We're not adding a whole lot. I mean, unless you want those extra pounds, but mostly in the fall time, you're going to lose that nitrogen anyway. So it's just a pound or 2 to boost activity.
So maybe 1 gallon in a 10-gallon solution, something like that to keep it easy. No, not very much. So I wouldn't spend a lot of money. The part of this and the value creation is we don't want you to have to spend a lot of money on nitrogen. Nitrogen you're not going to ever use. But if to the point of that, if you want to provide a little more food source, that's basically what you're doing. Not required, though. One thing I want to touch on is let Mike, I've used Mike as an example from a business perspective, how this has impacted their business. You've heard some of the science behind it, the reasons why this can truly be a fertilizer spend. Now going from a business and how it can impact your business in a positive way, I wanted to share just the story of I think what Mike's done with integrated ag, like you said, he was skeptical. He said, yeah, okay, we trust you, but we're going to try it. We're going to walk before we run. And we got 180 gallon out the first spring, which is enough for 1,800 acres. So they put it in multiple different places, and as you heard his testimony, they had good results. So with that, year two we did about 6,000, which is enough to treat 60,000 acres. They moved a lot of that to the fall, just because he said it worked better for their operation and timing, because they are no-till, 100% no-till. The seed-to-soil contact port that Patrick mentioned is very important, the emergence piece, but still seeing the value from the nutrient cycling. And we just sat down about a month ago. As you guys know, summer fill is coming to a close here, and we did their summer fill, and we did 12,000 gallons. So they've got it. They're looking to surpass 100,000 acres this fall, and I never like to say that without saying thank you, because we appreciate that. But I think it's a testimony to how it works, to also financially how it impacts the business. I got to think that there's been a financial impact in a positive way in a market that there wasn't really anything being sold, right? So I don't want to speak for them, but I want to highlight that, because I think coming out of this, it's also how can we impact your business, so that you get a positive impact, not only agronomically, but financially. So.
Is that going out with a herbicide?
No, so we actually apply a byproduct. We put a lot of it in with the byproduct application. And the byproducts would be our fertility instead of the commercial fertilizer.
That's liquid, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, one thing I want to touch on is I want to get kind of into the commercial fertilizer. Again, I got to reword my slide. Talked about commercial fertilizer. So excavator plays a role in our fall. That's what's coming up. How can we best manage that fall for that application so that we can maximize our fertility and turn that into a real fertilizer spend. Now, as we move forward and we talk about, Brian touched a little bit on the phosphate and some of the increases in soluble phosphate and soluble potassium that we're able to utilize for this year's crop. Commercial fertilizer is, in general, inefficient. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're applying. I'm gonna pick on one application. Is there a lot of starter in this room? Starter? Yep. Okay, so in the row or 2x2, 5 gallon, 10 gallon, 30 gallon, all of the above. When I look at starter fertilizer, I look at it as its purpose is because we're going into colder soils. We need phosphate availability early, and we're utilizing a product that is fairly inefficient. So we got to put 5 gallons on so we can hope to get enough early phosphate before it ties up and becomes unavailable to that crop. So as we talked about earlier, in that 15 to 25% range is really what we're getting. So if you put out 5 gallon, you're getting 20 pounds of P. How much are you actually getting into the crop, and how much is actually turning into phosphate you may never see again? So you're getting 4 or 5 pounds. I kind of made the comment at the last session that I've got a daughter in Colombia, and that check stings. It's coming up here in about a week, and I farm a few hundred acres myself, and I did the math on probably the phosphate that I threw away last year. I can tell you it pays for a pretty good amount of that college education. So I'm not promoting don't use fertilizer, but I'm saying rethink it. I mean, let's be efficient. Let's be smart about it. Let's reallocate the costs and get the most out of it, and see if we can put more dollars back in at the farm gate that they can use for other things to drive yields. So with that, Patrick, I got to jump into you first here. This is where he gets dynamic. But when we look at his business and what we're going to talk about here, you guys heard about Ether this morning. Pretty exciting launch. Flames, music. Hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. It was girls from Motley Crue. That was going to be a quiz, but a lot of you guys might have picked up on that already. Mitch really wanted that to roll out. He wanted to put a lot of excitement behind it because we are excited. Ether is an enzyme technology that comes from BRANDT. They've done a lot of work with it. They've validated the heck out of it. And so we have validated it in a soft launch last year, got really good results from it. And we're moving forward in a big way, in a way that it can actually replace your in-furrow starter. And we're actually and if you don't have any liquid on the platter, it'll be available in the planter box treatment that you heard about this morning as REVLINE HOPPER THROTTLE corn and soybeans. with ether. With that, Patrick Kanye's been working with this technology for 3 years, and it's changed their business, and I'll let him go with it from there.
Yeah, this product is terrible, so y'all don't need to use it. Just leave it all for me. I can figure it out. I can take care of it. No, I'm kidding. So I kind of started on a quest about 4 years ago. I started using this thing 3 years ago. And I had a farm that we farmed it's a history of hog manure, 30, 40 years of hog manure. So you guys that mess around with that kind of thing, you know what the phosphorus levels are like in those soils. 200 to 300 parts per million. So jacked way up there, but wasn't getting the yield levels that I wanted, and really I was not getting phosphorus into the plant. Okay, so my soils are loaded with phosphorus, but it's not getting into the plant. You mentioned tissue test. I do a boatload. And while tissue testing is not a perfect science, it is a measurement of how we're getting into the plant. So y'all that are farmers in here, when you can't get phosphorus, if either you don't have phosphorus in your soil or you're not getting phosphorus into the plant, what are you told to do? Y'all know the answer. Who said it? Put more on. That's what we're all told to do, right? If you ain't got phosphorus, put more on. Well, I don't need any more on. It's already in the soil. It's just not getting into the plant. So I started going down this road of trying to figure this thing out. I stumbled upon this product 3 years ago, and we started running it. Now, I'm going to tell you, I am full-on crazy dude now. Like, you might not want to listen to me as far as this one goes. I don't know that I'll ever spread DAP again. So, like, crazy guy, and I get that. But when I look at DAP, and you say the efficiency of that DAP, that 18460, 5 to 20% at best, 20% is being very, very gracious to that product. Everybody will tell me though, I get it, man, but I'm gonna have availability of that phosphorus that I spread out the back of that spreader truck the next year, the next year, the next year, the next year. And what I challenge you with is, if you start looking into heavy metals in your soils, specifically aluminum, and you take a look at that aluminum phosphate bond, and you look at how tight that dude is, you're not going to get it in your lifetime or your son's lifetime. That thing is not going to break. It is sitting there. So, I understand you may get it in the future, and you may, but it ain't happening anytime soon. So, most of us have 30,000 pounds of phosphorus in the top 6 inches of our soil already. All right? You already got that out there. 80,000 pounds of potassium, for the most part, in the top 6 inches of your soil. How do we make that stuff more available? If it's already sitting out there and these companies want $600, $800 a ton for some dry fertilizer that don't work anyways, what are we doing? So, in the last 3 years, we've made a pretty big conversion. Remember, I'm crazy dude, though. We're probably, I don't know, 60, 70, 80,000 acres worth of no dry fertilizer at all. Some of this stuff's been doing that for the last 3 years. Here's what's wild. Soil tests are going up. Somebody explain that to me. Yes, sir. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I have not got it all figured out, but I know there's something there. Does it have to do with our fungal levels in relation to our bacteria levels? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know all that stuff. But what I do know is when I use this product, this phosphorus with enzymes product, I'm taking 10 pounds to 12 pounds of this product per acre, and it's enough to support 225, 230 bushel corn. I've raised my phosphorus levels in the tissue. Now this is a full fertilizer replacement. So some of you guys are using 1034-0. You know the salt index in 1034-0. I'm running this stuff in furrow. I'm running it 2x2. I'm running it wide drop. I'm running it foliar. It's like gravy for me, man. I put it on everything. So, yeah. So, if I was you guys, I would walk before you run. When you take a pound of this stuff and you put it into a gallon of water and you look at the analysis of that product, there is nothing sexy about it. You're going to say, there's no way that I could take, I'm putting 2 pounds into a gallon. So I may run 5 gallons of this phosphorus product. Let's say it's 2 in furrow and 3 in our 2x2. And that's supporting a 230 bushel corn crop. Keeping my phosphorus levels, if you test guys want to come talk to me afterwards, I can tell you all that stuff. They're up there. And the yield is there. And it's not just 1 year. So, man, get your feet wet with this thing. Figure it out. Because I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite like it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, Patrick's got a lot of passion around this. This product, I mean, this technology has changed their business. And changed their business not only, and it's growing their business, it's given them a different story, right? They're able to go out and challenge the thought processes of the growers and seeing the successes, or else it wouldn't be growing. So kudos to you, man, for jumping in. I mean, I love that. So where we can, if guys are going to walk before they run, where we're positioning is Meristem, we're saying, hey, if you've got an in-furrow system or a 2x2 system, you know, even if you're going to continue to do what you're doing on the dry side, if you've got an in-furrow or 2x2 system, really consider taking that down, taking it out completely, or at least cutting it in half and incorporating UPSHIFT C. We've got guys that took it out completely. That 5 gallons turned into 2.5 pounds of UPSHIFT C with 5 gallons of water. And I promise you, you're going to see an increase in phosphate. And you take that and you put REVLINE HOPPER THROTTLE corn right over the top of it, you're going to have the best starter program. I'd put it up against any starter program in the market. That's one way right there to initially consider incorporating this technology into your business. As let Brian talk, you know, as guys start to do that, I think walking turns into running. Brian made that comment last session, and so Brian, real quick, if you could, because I know we got probably about 20 minutes, and there's a couple more things I want to hit on, but if you could just touch on the what Patrick was talking about, where we see this, you know, this. When we apply phosphate fertilizer or fertilizers in general, kind of how that works in the soil and what this ether technology is doing for us to benefit us.
So first, I may have to start calling you Gravy. That might be your new nickname. Patrick Gravy. I don't know if you got one, but that might stick. So the ether technology really is all about driving soluble P. We saw that diagram before where you saw the organic P, the insoluble P, and all the different ways it binds. And guys are like, how are you doing this with less total P? It isn't about total P, it's about soluble P in the root zone. The ether technology has 2 enzymes. Those enzymes start working immediately when you put them into the soil, which is a little bit different than some of the other technologies. A lot of those have to inoculate to the roots 7 to 10 days after to get the advantage. Ether starts breaking down residue and releasing nutrients immediately, and it increases the soluble pool of nutrients within the root zone. Precision placement is important. Obviously, with the ether technology, if you look at where it's at in the UPSHIFT C and in the hopper throttle, we're placing it near the seed. It's going to create about a 20 centimeter zone, and it's going to really up the soluble nutrient levels there. That has 2 advantages. One, as soon as that seed germinates, it's out of the ground fast. It's got a lot of available nutrients, so we tend to see that early vigor. The other big advantage we really see is increased microbial activity. Microbes have to eat too. They can't break down the residue. Those enzymes break down residue. So we see basically a sweet zone around that seed that really causes those plants to get out of the ground. And we also see in corn in particular a lot better emergence, uniform emergence, particularly in lighter soils. We're putting somewhere with the ether technology somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times more enzyme activity than naturally is in the soil. That 1,000 times would be the real sandy soils, 100 times would be the black soil. So ether technology is all about making stuff more efficient, using biology to make more soluble NPK.
Thank you. So this is a little bit of yield data, Brian. If you don't mind,
I'll touch on that a little bit. So UPSHIFT C it's actually a technology that BRANDT's had for a long time. So we have a lot of experience with it. Initially, we had all our experience in tree and vine crops out west. So we had great confidence in the technology. And then we kind of thought we need to bring this to the Midwest. A really good opportunity maybe to place 1034-0. We put out, really 3 years in a row, we put out 20 small block replicated trials. And the purpose of that was, one, to identify the rate. We found that a half pound dissolved in a gallon of water was pretty much equivalent. And really the data will show slightly better than 1034-0, which 2 things there. It has a big cost savings to the grower and a big ROI to the grower. while putting out a lot less P per acre. So one of the challenges I will tell you when you guys go out and sell this is you're going to have guys that are used to pounds per P per acre, right? They're going to ask you about pounds per P per acre. And there's a couple things, you can walk before you run a little bit here, but it isn't about pounds per P per acre. It's about soluble P in the root zone that the actual plant can uptake. And that's where the UPSHIFT C and the ether technology really thrives. And some of those guys will go for that. We had a lot of growers that just took the 2.5 pounds dissolved in 5 gallons when we first started at BRANDT, and they displaced some of their 1034 of them because they're worried about pounds per P. And that works great too if guys want to do that. What we found is after a couple of years, they start taking more and more 1034 out. And so in general, we're doing somewhere between, it depends on where you are in the country, right? Because starter rates vary. You'll have guys that run 10 gallons, you have guys that run 5 gallons, you get down to the southeast, they can even go 15 gallons. So the general rule is half pound per gallon, and that's been great. The other really great thing is you get some of the southeast guys, you got like cotton and stuff like that, the salt index is really low on this. So if you have crops that are sensitive to salt index, the UPSHIFT C is great. You can put a lot on without it. So,
Yeah, you mentioned the P soluble and versus pounds per P. Would it be fair to me to where my mind goes from my old ag retail days? I pick on sulfur, elemental sulfur. It's cheaper. I mean, I can go to a grower and say, hey, for $5 an acre, I can put on this much. I can put on 10 pounds of sulfur. But am I giving them plant available sulfur?
no.
No. But if I ask them to spend $15 an acre on potassium thiosulfate, am I giving them plant available sulfur?
Yes.
There you go. So, or just thiosulfate. So it's some of those, that's where we're at with, I think this conversation, that's where my head goes sometimes is, we have to recommend, we're trying, it's all about what's plant available, not what, a rock or a form we can put out there that, yeah, it's cheaper, or maybe it's lower cost, or whatever the case may be, or we think it's more pounds, so therefore it's lower cost per pound, but not always the right efficient method to go. So appreciate that. What I want to touch on real quick, as we'll keep moving through here, is with that, I don't want to forget about the nitrogen application. So we've talked about how we can supplement some of our fertilizer through the excavator, capturing that residue through the ether enzyme technologies and driving available phosphate at plant. One thing I don't want to forget about is nitrogen. We are going to use commercial nitrogen in our applications. So I just want to hit on real quick that we don't want to do is go out here and take ourselves backwards, right? Take a step backwards in what we're trying to do within the soil profile by utilizing products that maybe aren't as friendly. And not only that, but just when I look at nitrogen, I'm trying to capture it, keep it near the root zone, and get uptake as much uptake as possible. So it's really about nitrogen efficiency. And so when I look at, you guys are hearing about, our Maintain Elite and end-year dual action, and the quickest thing I can say about how that works is, we put kind of these cool words around it called microchain, but really that polymer technology is helping capture that, keep it up near the root zone, and we actually are seeing increased biological activity because where we've got that nitrogen stored up there in an upper root zone, we've got an environment that's actually releasing more nutrition, and we're putting out more roots because of it, and we're getting more uptake of the applied end. So Mike has a lot of experience with this product as a dealer and grower. The business is, I think, also taken off for them just as well as it has with the residue management product excavator, and I'll just let him speak on kind of what his customer feedback is.
Yeah, so switching from the competitor product, we got a guy switched over to Maintain Elite, obviously, and his anhydrous. The biggest thing they've seen, it's not corroding the tanks, the equipment. It's obviously better for the soil. It's more biologically friendly. But like I said, equipment's not cheap anymore. When they test their tanks, this is their second year, so when they tested this year, the thickness of the tank, they've had to replace less valves. And like I said, there's not just one thing that we need to be doing. Even with the UPSHIFT C, these are all different tools that we can use. Obviously, we have to finish out the crop. Yes, we want to start with that big root mass. Yes, we want to have big stalks, et cetera, but these are tools that we need to all utilize in our season-long plan. Perfect.
So yeah, I won't spend a lot of time on the nitrogen just for the sake of time, but if you're going to incorporate some of these other programs and you really want to get a bigger lift out of your not only your biological program, but out of your applied nitrogen, and be a little easier on your equipment, maybe be a little easier on your clothes. I spent 12 years in ag retail, and I can tell you that whenever I was around some of the other competitive products, my wife knew that when we were doing that business, and she said, strip it in the garage. Ain't coming in the house with that, because it stinks. But hey, if it stinks and it works good, that's fine. But just understand the difference is we're treating the nitrogen, not the acre. And so from a cost perspective, it varies depending on rate of nitrogen, but we're about placement. There's not another product in the market that's really targeting placement. How do we place the nitrogen so it's utilized more effectively? Again, it's almost like a delivery mechanism, right? It's like a delivery mechanism for the nitrogen. When we talk about delivery mechanisms, it's what we're doing within that. We're actually placing it so it's most effectively utilized by the plant. We're not just focusing on another process and then the nitrogen's still really flowing through the soil profile almost like untreated. We're going to get rid of it. We don't want to take out the biological component. We want to just place it more effectively and let it work harmoniously within what we're doing already as a system. So with that, one more section. We got a couple sections quick I want to touch on. Obviously, this is kind of stating the obvious, right? I mean, building a massive root system is pretty important. You know, we can release nutrition and we can do all these things and increase the efficiency of our nitrogen, but if we don't build that root system early and get good emergence, we're already behind the 8 ball. So with that, you know, one thing I'd like to highlight again from Dr. Fred Below, I thought he actually said it pretty well last year, where he talked about, you know, our effective root zone getting smaller. You know, we're planting higher pops in corn, and so that root zone's getting smaller, and so that makes me think about precision planting. You know, we spend a lot of money as an industry on equipment, better planters. Obviously, I encourage that still. We got to do that part right. But then we look at some of our ways we fertilize and things like that, and we aren't utilizing the precision mentality anymore. We do know. So what we're doing with these technologies is we want them placed near the seed. When we focus completely on REVLINE Hopper Throttle, that franchise, why we're so passionate about it, why we know it's going to be successful. When we talk about things like we're delivering the efficacy of a quart of zinc per acre. When we talk about those kind of things, it's because of the efficiencies being right on the seed, and as that seed germinates, that we're getting that nutrition, and we're getting those biologicals are working to drive that nutrient solubility right there around that zone that Brian talked about. This is some data that come out of BRANDT. You know, this is kind of the standard control over here. And one thing I like to point out is the industry knows that early root development is important. Everybody's trying to tackle it from a different direction. So if you got starter fertilizer, they're telling you add some humic acid. They're telling you add a plant growth regulator. We've got REVLINE 4.0. We're glad to sell it to you in furrow for sure. It works. You know, we're going to give some plant growth regulators there that can help stimulate that root development. As you can see, those are the two over there. But when you look at the ether and zinc combined, that's the winner. You know, and where we can add those enzymes right at that planter box treatment, that's part of the reason why this is the reason ether got introduced into the hopper throttle. Because where we can introduce ether into the hopper throttle paired with zinc, and that's the reason we added zinc to the soybean pail as well. In case everybody's wondering, why did they add zinc? Why did they do that? It's because of this kind of stuff right here and the influence it has on root development and phosphate uptake. And Brian, if you just take a minute and maybe just walk us through this on your findings and
yeah. Obviously, you guys see the root mass here, but you can't see the top growth. One thing that we were after when we were developing ether was to have a better, obviously, establishment. But one difference is that the root to shoot ratio, which is important in our trial work, the root to shoot ratio on the ether technology stays the same as the control plant, which means we're not hormonally throwing the balance off. With some of the other auxin ones, sometimes you get more top growth if you get like jib or elongation. With that, we're staying very proportional, which we like. Top growth is important too because that's where a lot of the photosynthetic activity comes from. Another nice thing to note, if you really are into PGRs and auxins and you want to run it, you can run it with ether all day long or the UPSHIFT C technology. And then a really big boost for ether, one of the drivers for us is as soon as you put ether, the enzyme technologies in the ground, they start working immediately. Almost all the microbial products wait for the seed to germinate, and when the seed germinates, the radicle comes out, and then they'll colonize the roots. So it takes 7 to 14 days, and then they have to colonize. a lot of the benefits you see from the ether are immediate. And what's really cool about that is when you put the ether technology with a hopper throttle, but with the microbes already in it, that ether creates a great atmosphere as soon as those microbials, and they will take off and they'll colonize the roots even better, which I really like that name. You think about ether turning up stuff and getting it going. Not only is it going to turn the nutrition up, but it's really going to boost those microbes to colonize the roots even better. So we're pretty excited about it. And like I said, you can run it with the stuff like you make if you want, but it will perform all day long. When we originally developed that, we ran a lot of trials against things like Ascend and the IBA Chem 10 stuff. And, we can mesh and perform just as good as those all day long. For those guys that are worried about, am I going to get roots because we're talking about nutrients, you're going to get better roots in an establishment with ether technology.
And with that, Brian, I didn't get a chance to touch on this last time, and I wanted to, so we've got the ether and the zinc, right? We're delivering that through the planter box. As Brian mentioned, all the benefits that come from that. We're also doing something unique in that we're delivering Terrasym through the planter box. And Terrasym's been proven all by itself to be a significant advantage. What's the problem with Terrasym? It's a princess. No offense to princesses or anything like that. That's why I joke and say that. It doesn't like anything. It doesn't like, it dies so easy. So that's where the value of the biocapsule with Terrasym has been, I think, a huge part of our success is being able to deliver that product so that you're getting 100% efficacy. And I feel like this is where you're getting a 1 + 1 + 1 equals a higher number. You've got experience around Terrasym and working with that product?
Yeah, so we started working with New Leaf and Terrasym before they even came to market, and they originally came out as a seed treatment. And so we worked with those guys, and a lot of our original data was seed treatment data, mostly on soybeans, a little bit of corn, even on peanuts, actually. And where we could deliver Terrasym efficiently on the seed treatment, we got very, very good results. We did have issues with the seed treatment. It was difficult to handle. It was difficult to use, and there were some viability issues that we were working through. And this was during their development stage. But one thing we knew right away was the methyl-trope was a very powerful microbe if you could deliver it efficiently. It is a gram-negative bacteria. Gram-negative bacteria are difficult to work with. They are fickle. And I got really excited when I saw that Meristem had picked that up with the biocapsule, because that was the perfect solution to the problem. When BRANDT was looking at it, it was like, we knew it could work well, but we didn't have the delivery mechanism to do that. And I'm even more excited to have the ether with it to boost that. I can tell you we were working with it as early as 2015. It's come a long ways. We saw a lot of tissue tests bump up with the Terrasym stuff. We've seen that with the ether. Putting the two together would be really powerful. So yeah, I think it's a great partnership, and particularly the biocapsule makes that whole thing just work great.
Awesome, thank you. And I think between Mike here and Pat here, I think they can say that that's a piece of their business that's going to grow significantly, the Hopper Throttle franchise. Already taken in some pretty good summer fill orders from these guys as well on that, just because of their confidence around this whole system and how that's going to drive their business. Because one thing that's really cool that Mitch mentioned when we first started is, hey, with or without liquid, REVLINE Hopper Throttle corn and soybeans can go on every acre. And we got lots of acres to tackle, and which equals lots of opportunity. And so don't want to forget about the soybeans. You guys haven't been outside yet. You will. There's a gentleman out there. You'll go to the soybean trial. There's a guy out there named John Torrance. He's a good friend of mine. Known him since he was probably 16. I think he's around 30, 32 now. Worked together with him and his dad since he started farming. His dad was farming before that. But they're kind of high yield chasers. They like to do a lot of things, but they do a lot of things the right way. And we actually farm the acres I farm. We actually farm them together because honestly, I'm on the road 5 days a week, and I don't have time to put a crop in or take it out, but I still want to be involved. And so he's my partner in that. And he competes in some competitions. It's all about ROI. I mean, I think that's what Extreme Ag's about. It's all about ROI. We can all throw the kitchen sink at something and say that we did something, but did you make any money? And so we ROI farm. And he was able to place number 3 in the nation for the seed companies. It was an NK competition, number 3 in the nation for soybean, and number 1 in the state of Illinois. And he will tell you, if you pulled him aside, and I know Elliot's talked to him before, he does a lot of stuff in season. He would probably say that program is proprietary. If you want to know what it is, we can talk about it. But in season, what he attributes to a lot of that success is he doesn't have liquid on the planter for soybeans. He was able to add this REVLINE Hopper Throttle soybean. This was prior to ether and prior to the zinc addition. he was able to add that, and he thought that all of his lower areas were his, soils, a lot of variable soils out there in western Illinois near the Mississippi River, and he would go from 80, 90 bushel beans to 30 in the same field. He said, my 30s went to 50s. My bottoms came up. If you influence that bottom and bring it up and create consistency, and he just thought that it handled the stress better, those lighter soils, and I think this picture kind of illustrates that as what ether alone, the addition that now we have available in soybeans alone, to even kickstart that microbial activity. We've got the microbes in there, we've got the zinc in there. Now that ether being in there is basically going to kickstart it, like ether. It's going to kickstart that process to get that microbial process happening quicker and deliver that available phosphate to the crop right away as it emerges. And that's going to be, I think, wildly impactful. There's some of the products. This is some of the marketing we're going to do for you guys. Yeah, we're doing it for us. We're definitely doing it to drive, but we want to drive business to you. And so please go out and make the calls. We are going to stand behind this message. We've already put it in print in 360,000 magazines. So that is who we are now. We are asking people to consider moving some of that spend to this biological spend. So we're stepping out and making that claim, and we haven't done that. We can be cavalier, but we haven't done that without a lot of counsel, working with those that have had experience around this and help us validate this message. So with that, here's kind of the call to action, like you heard about earlier. If we can leave here and call on 12 million acres, we got enough people in this building to definitely call on 12 million acres. That would equate to about 6,000 farms. And if we did that even before harvest, the next 30 days, the impact that could have on your personal business and that can have on your customer base could be huge. So there is no slow time in this business, but we do. But it seems like we're always busy. But the perfect thing is take advantage of the time you have now between harvest and go capture that business while everybody's talking about fertilizer.
Will the KDS be available, or will it be?
We'll still be able to get that. Yes, sir.
Memory sticks from the material.
Memory sticks. Yes. So memory sticks when you're leaving here. We're all wrapped up. I think from a time perspective, is that where we're at? Are we on the right spot? Perfect. That's 3 times in a row. We've stopped on time. Please see him on the way out. The memory sticks for the presentation you saw earlier, and thank you very much for the time. And we'll see everybody after the next one.